about us, and it's time to bow down. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Bow Down. Dennis, lovely to see you as always. I am excited to get into it today.
Likewise, Reese, as always, looking so lovely, so beautiful, so glad to see you.
Thank you. You too.
Can't wait to continue our conversation on Jezebel and where we go with
Yeah,
this one. The last one was so exciting. We got sidetracked. It was so good. So
right.
let's see where we go
So
today.
after that, for all of our listeners, we got a little sidetracked, got into other stuff. So we thought in this series of biblical womanhood, Jezebel certainly deserves a little bit more time and attention. So we thought we would come back, revisit, and explore a little bit more of her story, her energy, and the lessons to be learned there. So I guess I kind of wanted to start with asking you, Dennis, after we finished our first conversation about Jezebel, what was it that you felt like was the biggest thing that we had yet to cover? And maybe we should start there. Like, it maybe not, that's not even a great way of framing that question. I think what I really want to ask is, what is the thing that you really felt called to talk about that we hadn't gotten to yet?
Yeah, I think, we talked a lot about sort of what actually happened in the biblical text. So we talked about, what we know from that's written down in the Hebrew scripture about Jezebel. What I think, where I would like to I think focus my, maybe our conversation a little more is, what's changed since then? I mean, these texts were written, 700 BC or later, even,
Right.
but certainly thousands of years ago, 2000 plus years ago, depending on what dating you want to go with. What do we see? How does it play out today? So both, how has the idea of Jezebel, this archetype in some senses, played out throughout history, and then where do we see it play in today's world? And we kind of touched on some of this, but I think maybe a deeper exploration might be warranted of how we see this playing out throughout the years, but also modern reflections. To me, I think are important as well. How does that sound for
Yeah,
you?
that sounds
And I mean, did
beautiful and lovely.
anything that came up for you too that you would like to talk a little about?
Yeah, that for sure. I think the evolution of this is really important because, I mean, similarly to how we discussed the Madonna and Mother Mary, how it, like, it starts rooted in the text, but like any work of art, which the more and more that I dig into the Bible now, having deconstructed it, the more and more I am seeing it as a literary thing, as a work of art, not as a instruction manual so much. But I think it's really fascinating in art to not just talk about like the art itself, but the reactions to it and the conversations that arise around it as being artful in and of themselves. Like a random kind of example, but the Duchamp sculpture of the urinal that was like so controversial because it's a found object sculpture of an old urinal, and he, I guess, offered it as a sculpture just in and of itself. It was an old urinal on its side, and you either love it or hate it, right? It's either like, this is amazing, it is like anarchy and sticking it to the man while also like making a statement about art itself. And then you have the people that are like, this is actual trash. What are we doing? What is art? And I think, to me, the art of that piece is the conversation itself, right? It's like, it could have been anything. It doesn't matter that it's urinal or not, or even what Duchamp chose to do with it, or even if that was his intention. To me, the art has become the conversation around it. And so I think digging into that and what we see around Jezebel, if we consider her, the archetype to be an artful thing, what the conversation around her has become, how it evolves, and maybe even how we hope that it evolves.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
One thing I will say that in this kind of idea around like the modern day conversation around Jezebel. In trying to do research on Jezebel, anyone will immediately find that they are inundated with video upon article upon essay about how to resist the Jezebel spirit in the church. And I had to like actively search to try and find things that I wanted to like read and listen to besides that, because it's like, okay, that's a part of this, right? I want to engage with that material a little bit. It's certainly interesting, even if I disagree with it in some senses. But the fact that it was just so much, and I found maybe one video on YouTube that wasn't from a Christian or Catholic creator about Jezebel. And that could just be like my feed. And I do tend to watch a lot of like Christian apologist content because I find it deeply fascinating. And so it's like maybe it's just offering me up what it thinks I want to hear and see and would agree with. But yeah, I thought that in and of itself was really interesting, that it's like the conversation that is being had around Jezebel is not nearly as nuanced as the one around Mother Mary, or even like Lilith, that's considered to be a dark mother goddess. The spiritual community has really reclaimed Lilith in a big way. And they haven't quite gotten around to Jezebel yet, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, it is, and I mean, I think that's a great starting point. I remember growing up in the church, of the accusations of the Jezebel spirit being hurled, um, and I think I mentioned it in our last podcast. Not necessarily always at women, although certainly it was often at women, but it was really anybody that dared to challenge the norms of the church or what public life should be. And typically I would say it's these accusations are used as a weapon against confident, outspoken women. More often than not, it can be used anywhere. But I mean, really, this insult. I mean, think about what it's designed to do. You say something that's like, oh, you have I mean, first of all, it immediately says that, this is there's something wrong with you. There's something not you present, right? This idea of having to police female ambition, this suggestion that assertiveness, sexuality, or just being independent, having a free thought, are literally signs of some sort of demonic influence is the message, right?
Yeah, that's so
And so,
fascinating. Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, what do in oftentimes women are told to repent of this spirit in order to even have a chance to lead or speak or even question authority. Um, and I'm just, to me, and I'm curious what you make of this, but this is something that I've seen, but as I explore it, as I even listen to myself talk about it, as I hear you talk about, that's what comes up, all of these churchy based, Jezebel spirit sort of thing. It speaks to me how deep seated the fears are of a woman who has power. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking thousands of years later, and I mean, even other things like Mary, Lilith, all of these other controversial characters have been redeemed in some senses, but
Right.
Jezebel still remains sitting alone. And
Yeah.
for what? She did nothing wrong. I mean, in some very that other people weren't doing. It was a man who did the same things as we saw last time, like King David, was cool. It was like, oh,
Right.
he's a man after God's own heart. So this isn't just about bad deeds, because a lot of people in the Bible did bad things. A lot of people did okay things. I mean, there's a lot there. But again, just the fact that you look this up and 100 things come up, but they're all how to stop this, how to not be a Jezebel, how it shows the fear of female power and autonomy, and how church shapes, this concept shapes the gender dynamics that are in a church. I can't. I'm curious what it is for you as a woman to, and we've both talked about our deconstruction and so forth, but did you ever feel that oppression, like in your church going experiences, like Like, what was your experience like? Because I saw it from the outside in some ways, right? Not
Yeah.
it was. I don't know that that was ever hurled at me as an epithet, but um, I definitely heard it hurled at other women, heard it hurled at other men, even. But I'm just
Yeah.
curious, what has been your experience?
Yeah. I think um in reflecting about this, it's really fascinating actually because a lot of my deconstruction story isn't in church in the way that you think about it because so much of the religious messaging I received was actually through religious private schools. In Texas, if you want to go to a quote unquote good school, which so many of the private schools in Dallas where I grew up were founded as white flight schools, and we see a huge dichotomy between DISD public schools and the local private schools. It is actually a really deep problem that bears that asks for a lot of interrogation and something there to be done, right? So, preface on that, I, in many ways, am extremely privileged in having been able to go to any school I want for whatever education me and my parents wanted me to have. And I ended up switching schools a bunch. I think I
Mm.
went to I counted at one point, and I want to say it was like 9 different schools by the time I graduated high school, from like kindergarten through high school. It's like 9 different schools. And at least 50% of them are uh, religious in some sense of the word. And I think that really, in more direct response to your question, I think it problematizes the way that this information was communicated to me because religious information is couched on the same level as academic information, right? It is being presented to you as a way to educate you, to prepare you for life as a successful, happy, productive member of society, whatever it means. And a lot of these schools, Bible class was just another class that was required alongside science and math and English. And I'm really grateful for that education because of these Bible classes. I've read the Bible cover to cover many times, and I've learned a lot about the Bible and the inconsistencies in the Gospels and all of the ways that we can explain it away really easily. And so I think the Jezebel spirit is problematized in that it gets difficult when you want to tell the goody two shoes girl who is like the top of her class, not even that this is specifically me. I'm thinking of a few other of my peers. That is the one who always raises her hands. Her hand is the one who is the smartest in the room, who is going to be valedictorian once we all graduate. It's hard to not couch her within the Jezebel spirit because she's constantly asking questions. She's constantly wanting to learn more. And in the English classroom, that looks very different than it does in the Bible classroom.
Mm.
And where does that line from wanting to learn and be a student and holding curiosity towards something get blurred with take what I say as a commandment, right? And I think the classroom really made that more difficult for me. In terms of just direct messaging that I received, it was certainly like the ask questions, but you're going to be shot down if and when you do. Like, we know that we need to say that it's good to ask questions. We know that we want to tell people that it's good to have your own relationship with Christ and walk the journey that's right for you, and develop your own specific relationship with the Lord, and that it is deeply personal. And those are the good things to say, because it sounds crazy when you say there's one right way to do it. And we know that sounds bad, so we're not going to say it. But as soon as someone starts doing something in their own way that isn't our way, we're going to make sure that they know that is not
Right.
good.
Yes, you're not doing the make believe the right way.
You're
Like,
right,
there's a way we do
right.
the make believe. Like, you're not following the Calvinball rules.
Yeah.
Basically, if people really understood what I mean, everything about like the idea of, I mean, I've come to the place where really, and people may take umbrage at this, and that's fine. But I now view religion as like a hobby. Like, I mean, basically, like you have a hobby. Like, I enjoy talking this book, and how to live by it. It's like I mean, it really is like, hey, come to my book club. And, I don't even like the book much anymore. And I don't really read the book, but I'm still going to go to this book club because I've gone to this book club for 30 years. Like, I mean, and we sing at the book club, which again, to my mind is also quite ludicrous. Like the whole thing, like you can't make up stuff like this. I mean, like that this is what so many people do on myself included, frankly. I don't know. Yeah, it's a weird it's kind of a
Yeah.
weird thing when you
I mean,
and yeah.
you want to talk about not doing the make 'em ups right? The middle school that I went to was Church of Christ, which is a very specific denomination of evangelical Christianity. And Church of Christ denomination does not believe in dancing or singing with music, because there's some verse in the Bible that says, like, only use your voice to uplift the Lord. Was there still a band? Yeah, there was the school band and the drum line and the marching band, but not in chapel. Because in chapel, we only use our voice to uplift the Lord. And we didn't have, it was only middle school for me, because eventually I ended up leaving this school, and I think the reasons are likely evident. So prom was never something for me, but homecoming in middle school, like a homecoming dance. We didn't have dances, we had banquets. We had the homecoming banquet. But some parent, usually like the class parent, would organize a non-school sanctioned after party that was a dance after all of these things. And so just this weird gray line of like, we need to, like, quite literally, we need to say that we do these things, and we need to do these things by the book. But we all know that, like, okay, once you've done the banquet, sure, go dance. Like, we know in chapel we really shouldn't be using instruments, but yeah, go play your in the band in the middle of halftime at the football game. That's not bad. And just the contrived nature of all of these things, it's like the cognitive dissonance that you must hold in order to have a belief system that is so rigid. You have to hold cognitive dissonance. You have to. And I think that oftentimes when you see someone enthralled with the Jezebel spirit, the reason why it is so threatening is because it feels like it is shaking this foundation that is supposed to be solid, that is supposed to be like the rock that you build your house on, right? I'm probably misquoting whatever verse that is, but it's like, if you don't want someone questioning something, you question it yourself first, and you own the ways in which it doesn't make sense. When you bring in the covering up and the masking and the explaining away of little things is when you do see people questioning it. And I think that it's these questions that the people who want to make them nice and neat and clean and say, no, we're good, we don't have to ask any more questions, we got it, we're solved, box checked, we're going to heaven, we're doing it. If you are convincing yourself of that all day, every day, when anyone says, but those two things don't quite add up. You have a school band, but you don't play music in chapel? How do you make sense of that? You find yourself inventing excuses that are so ludicrous, so far beyond anything that's found in the actual text, that of course it looks ridiculous. But you have to do that in order to save this idea of safety, of comfort, of solid ground. And I think one of the things that religion and actually a lot of worldviews do is promote this idea of certainty being the thing that we're shooting for. to begin with? Like, why is that the goal? And certainty actually really leads you down the path of a lot of ridiculousness if you're pushing it to the point. Like the argument from absurdity, right? Like you get there with anything if you keep going. And so I think the Jezebel spirit threatens the very notion that you can be certain about anything, because it's usually just questions.
I love that. And it's so funny. I don't know. You talk about synchronicity or timeliness. I just was listening to something the other day, and I think it may have been even just like a random television show. I don't know. But they were talking about how certainty is like such a huge problem. Like we should never try to be certain about anything. And it just resonated that when you said that about, this, because you're right. I mean, if if you have to be certain of this ideal, and then you need to constantly explain why certain things are okay and certain things, and it really is much like, hey, you're not running this imaginary tea party the right way. Like that's not how we serve imaginary tea. God doesn't like that. you
Yeah.
know our imaginary guests are going to be very upset if you serve tea that way.
It does
I mean,
very much evoke the image of like playing house when you're little, or like any adult that's like played pretend with kids will know they go to do something and then the little kid goes, "No, that's not how you do it. It'll make Teddy upset when you do that. He doesn't like that." And it's like, what are we talking about? Of course, when you're a little kid and you're doing it, it's like, oh yeah, of course, you've invented these rules to make the game safe, right? Like rules create safety within the game. And I get how with the like terror management theory, I suppose, like the fear of death is with us all the time, and that feels deeply unsafe. So we want to invent rules to make this game feel a lot safer. But the rules start to look really ridiculous when you go back to the reason of inventing them.
yeah, and if you're going to invent, if you just accept that you're inventing the rules out of, you're
Yeah.
just making up a game, then maybe you don't take it quite so. I mean, that's your game, and you're allowed to make up.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. That's the thing. I mean, so few people choose they don't choose their religion. They're chosen. I mean, their religion chooses them by virtue of
Right.
the household they're born into, the geography they're born into. I mean, if you and I were both born in Afghanistan or born in Indonesia, we would most likely be Muslim, and we would be talking about Allah and feminism in Islam, and it would be a totally different conversation, perhaps. But it's
Right.
all, there's no right. Like if people would just stop the certainty. Yes, I'm certain of my imaginary tea party is the best. Like if kids did this, but we do it, and can we just recognize it? Can we, but when you're talking, I mean, it is life or death, right? Like, if I'm wrong on this, I'm betting. I'm and to me, it's like, why would you make up rules of a game that are so convoluted? Like, if you're gonna make something up, like, why not make something up that like empowers you?
Yeah.
Why are you gonna make up a game where you're a piece of shit, and the only reason, you're lucky that there's somebody better than you who's willing to save your dumb ass, because otherwise you'd be going to hell. But that's the game you want
Yeah.
to make up. Like,
That's so
oh
funny.
well, yeah, you were a piece of shit, but God's not a piece of shit. The games master is awesome, but
Right.
he's so awesome that he created a way for you to be less of a piece of shit, but you can't really do anything about it. Somebody else
Right.
has
But
to
it's still
die.
out of your control. It
Right.
is. It
Just think
calls.
about it. Like,
Yeah.
oh,
It makes me think one in a past life I was it's not in the literal past life sense since now I feel the need to clarify that, especially since I'm so open about my spirituality. I don't know what's going on with past lives, but when I just said in a past life, meaning several years ago in my life right now, um, I was a professor at the university I graduated from for like a year and a half, and one of the courses that I taught was called Life Design, and it pulls from the textbook we use for the course is Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans, I want to say. If I'm getting that wrong, it'll be in the show notes. It'll be in the description. It's a wonderful book. It's really helpful. It's like classic self-help stuff, but really grounded in practical, applicative science. It's great. But one of the assignments in this class was what's called an Odyssey map, and it's talked about in the book, but the assignment that I would have my students do is build out 3 different Odyssey maps. And an Odyssey map maps out the next, 5 years of your life. What are major goals you want to hit in each year? What are your hopes for that year? What are places you want to travel to, relationships you want to experience, concerts you want to go to, friends you want to make, all sorts of foods you want to try, from career and textbook success to interpersonal and intrapersonal fulfillment. And I would have them build 3 Odyssey maps. One, which is the path I'm on now, right? If I keep going the way I'm going, what does the next 5 years look like? The next is dream life. What would be really cool if I could do this? And then the third one is no holds barred, whatever you want. If money was no object, if time was no object, if no one would have anything bad to say about your life whatsoever, what would the next 5 years look like? Almost every single student in the 3 semesters that I taught this class, so I'll say 60 students that I put through this exercise, probably 55 of those 60 had to invent some tragedy that happened in their life to make that third life the one that they're walking down. It was always my dog died and it sends me on a spiral, so I end up dropping out of college and now I'm on this path. My house burns down in a fire, which actually means that I need to do this other thing that sends me down this path. And then they describe the most beautiful, I travel for a living and I spread joy and I wake up whenever I want to and I'm so fulfilled. They describe the most beautiful lives in the world. And I'm why are y'all starting from this place of tragedy? Why can't you just have the good? What is it about that? And all of the students would be well, I don't know. It just seems so impossible if something crazy didn't happen to send me down that path. It would never happen.
See how we limit ourselves?
Right. It's so fascinating.
That is a perfect example of how we limit ourselves by our thinking. There's nobody putting those chains on those students. You made no mention of that. It wasn't come up with a tragic backstory to.
Yeah, you're not Spider-Man.
Right. How did you get but that is the hero's journey, right? There's always an inciting incident that happens, in 10 minutes of the story, right? There's always, that's just the hero's journey, right?
We all have an Uncle Ben.
That is so fascinating, though.
Right?
Why we need that to I'm actually curious about you said that out of 60 students, 55 of them, basically, or whatever, had to have this tragic backstory to get them moving. What about the other 5? Were they just hey, fuck it, let's see what I got. I'm a rock star,
I mean, it's fascinating because I think the 5, and I'm kind of pulling those numbers from distant memory, so who knows the exact whatever, but for the kids that didn't have the tragic part of this, I think a lot of it was their ability to commit to the unbelievability of it, in that, the assignment for this one is wildest dreams, anything I want, no one cares, and they could really buy in to the given circumstances of that. I think the other students that had trouble with it were the ones that were but someone's always going to have something to say, but it's really hard for me to imagine a life where I actually don't need to make money and food is just always on the table and I just always have a roof over my head and I'm good. it's almost like I think the five that are able to do it are the ones that like are probably more predisposed to enjoying fantasy and sci-fi novels in a similar sense of like you can kind of put the unrealistic portion of it out of mind in order to lean into this belief. Not that it's unrealistic that your wildest dreams are possible, but I think it's both of those are a function of like it feels like it probably won't really happen in this lifetime. The two options of moving forward are, okay, how can I make it actually happen in this lifetime? Well, I have to pay a great price. Or how can I make it happen in this lifetime? It's not going to, so whatever. Um, at least that's my read of it. I think the third group would be someone who says it can happen in this lifetime and how. Which
And
I think
maybe
would be
a
interesting
fourth group
too.
is a fourth group would just say it is going to happen. I don't know how. That to
Yeah.
me is like true creation, right? I mean, because that's what the Bible points out. That's what a lot of these traditions point out. It's this idea of believe. You know, we're not called to. We're called to. Jesus says, believe that you, when you pray. Which what is prayer? Prayer is just a petition. It's communication. It's intention. Really, it's this is what I want. Right. This is my prayer. But when you pray, believe you receive it and it's yours. Is what he and you're not. It's not. You're not called to believe you have it, which is what I've said in the past. Oh well, and it's a subtle distinction that I still try to work on. But it's you have to believe that this very act of believing that I have it is what actually gives it to me. So I don't believe that I have it, but I believe that the fact that I did this intention is enough. Just by deciding, by saying, this is mine, I want this, I choose this with intention, that's enough to actually somehow, in some way that I don't understand, make it occur in this world. And I am personally convinced that is the way everything works. Like that we are just out picturing ourselves daily. Like, and we just don't realize it because so much of it is just background autopilot stuff. And when we do get, I mean, and again, I kind of view this the whole Jezebel spirit, this idea, it's just a pendulum, right? It's designed to keep the status quo. It's designed to prevent fear. I mean, even just noticing the way that, I mean, if we look at the facts of Jezebel, right? She was a foreign queen who was aggressive, pushed her husband to take what he wanted, to be the king that he said he was. I mean, that's she defended her religion. I mean, the thing she believed in when her prophets were murdered, she got angry about that. I mean, those are really the facts. Everything else is just opinion. It's slant. I mean, but just even there's no mention, and I think I touched upon this lesson. There's no mention in the Bible of Jezebel being sexual in any way, shape, or form. She is not sexualized. They don't talk about deviance or she didn't have an affair. She didn't seduce somebody. There's no evidence that she was ever even promiscuous or of any of that. But her name became, synonymous essentially with sexual immorality and danger. And there's nothing that was even there. When women wield power that is visible, that men can see, patriarchal societies have to reach, their playbook. It's a very simple playbook. Sexualized, make it a sexual issue. Because again, men are I'm convinced afraid of women sexually, just in general. Like there is this weird, Jungian sort of cultural fear of men that men have of women in general. I don't, we talked a little bit about why might it be. I don't know. I'd still love to explore that more. But instead of confronting a woman's leadership or her competence, and actually have and we see this with AOC today. We see this with Kamala. Like rather than talk about their competence, how do folks attack AOC? Well, she's a bartender. It's constantly denigrating her, turning her
Oh,
in, using sexual slander. Call her a slut. Call her a whore. Oh, she's just a bartender. All of these names. And this is designed to, you don't have to listen to what she says. It doesn't matter what she says, right? Because it discredits her authority and makes her power seem illegitimate, seem dangerous even. Like, oh, she doesn't know what she, and this is a textbook case to me. This is the legacy of Jezebel, of how female authority is undermined through sexual defamation, which is still used to control. I mean, what's the first insult? She slept her way to the top.
Yep.
Right?
Well, and not
how
even,
often do you hear that?
I think it's also fascinating how it's not just defamation, but also like being like a good aspect of sexuality being ascribed to women is also just as damaging. If I had a nickel for every conversation, for all the times that in a conversation AOC comes up and I hear a paraphrasing some sort of version of, I hate what she has to say, but she's hot. She's got a great ass. And I'm like, that's a congresswoman. How dare you? How dare you? She is beautiful. She is a beautiful, beautiful woman and a beautiful human, but not just for the way she looks, for the way that she fights and loves fiercely. And it's like, not only is there this, oh, she's a slut, she's a whore, she slept her way to the top, which of course is the refrain for Kamala. But this also, like, yeah, you should feel bad for being sexual, but also the only good thing you have to offer is sexual too.
Right.
Like, how is it both at the same time?
It's a classic double bind, right? Like, yeah, it's so, to me, it's just indicative of sort of that no-win situation. And I mean, we even see, Jezebel is used in the New Testament in Revelation to again talk about a woman in Revelation. So even as early as 100 Common Era, when Revelation was probably written somewhere around the early, around 100 CE. It's already this story being weaponized against outspoken women. In the American South, I think another example, the Jezebel stereotype was was used to justify the sexual exploitation of black women during slavery. And just how enduring this insult is shows how our society recycles these tropes, these misogynistic, incorrect tropes to control women, particularly women of color, but I think women in general, by branding them as inherently deviant or threatening or minimizing them, either boiling down their sexuality to they're not attractive, or the only thing good about them is that they are attractive, as you pointed out. Like, the insult goes both ways. Oh, well, the only thing good about you is you got a great body, versus, oh, oh, look at that, she's ugly. She's, I wouldn't talk. I mean, such terrible. I mean, that doesn't men don't experience that. In the same way. Period. Full stop. Like, I don't know a way in which. Listen. I mean, we all get minimized in certain ways, and so it's not to say this is better, but what we're talking about with the Jezebel idea, the Jezebel spirit, where it lands today. So that's what we're here talking about,
right?
And I don't know, just the idea that I feel like she would be horrified to know that her name was used to justify, the sexual abuse of women in the South. I mean, I can't imagine how awful.
Yeah. I do wonder if Jezebel verses are in the slave Bible or not. For those that may not be familiar, there is a version of the Bible that cut out certain verses and passages and books to give to enslaved people, so that they wouldn't get any wrong ideas about their station in life, which is just atrocious and horrible in so many innumerable ways. so that's just something that popped in my head that I think is fascinating. I wonder, because also in the Old Testament, there are so many verses that the God of the Old Testament, call it Yahweh, as a lot of evangelical Christians like to do to try and separate it from their God that they worship today, but where God literally commands genocide and commands slavery, gives blatant instructions about how to enslave people. And so I don't know, that's just something that's kind of popped up. Other thing about what you said that I want to add to is the idea that like Black trans women disproportionately have the most violence enacted against them physically in America of any demographic. It is Black trans women. And I think the sexual nature of being a transgender person, I mean, I don't know. I don't even know what I want to say about it. I think it's interesting because it almost makes someone else so uncomfortable to see someone living out their truth in this way that is deeply about their physicality, that must be tied to this hatred of it, which is horrible and horrifying to see. But I don't know. I am clearly not an expert on this issue, and I don't want to speak out of turn. Or give explanations for something that shouldn't need to be explained because it shouldn't be happening at all. But yeah, I just want to honor the violence that is done against women of color and queer women too. I think that's a really great point that you raised, that we should be thinking about, and knowing that Jezebel was a woman of color, right? That, I mean, pretty much all of the people in the Bible were, but
Yeah.
it's an interesting through line. I don't know if she would necessarily be a different like visual color than other people, but she certainly was considered of a different race than the people that she was queen to.
Yeah, she was foreign, right? I mean,
Yeah.
in addition to being a woman, so two strikes, right?
Yeah.
Uh, if not more, and again, I do think another point is that and we've said it before on this show, is history is written by the winners,
Yeah.
and the fact is that the patriarchy was the one writing the Hebrew text. The Yahwehists, or were ultimately what's in the Bible, and so um so why would they, what are the lessons maybe that the writers even intended from this story, is another way for us to think about it. And certainly certainly this was not objective. Nothing in the Bible, I think, is objective history. I think that's the first thing to, if it is history at all, it's not at all clear to me that it is in fact history. I tend to think of the Bible more allegorical anyway, just in general. But in this case, let's forget all of that and just say, what might they have been saying? Well, you could definitely, um, you could definitely talk about the fact that she was a foreign queen, again, remember, the Bible didn't even call her queen, but she was foreign, and you could think of it maybe as a cautionary tale around the dangers of foreign influence. Um, but to me, it's very clear it was never meant to be just the facts, right? It was written by the winners with an agenda, and part of that agenda, there may have been multiple. I'm not here to say this was all of it. This was the only thing they were looking to do, but there's clearly an agenda to demonize a powerful woman and to justify, why you need men in charge, why there needs to be patriarchal control. Um, and I think this is something we're going to see. We've already talked about with Mary. We've talked about it, I think, with the Sublime and these other things, how a lot of these stories that we inherit about dangerous women reflect the anxieties of those who are in power, and not the actual reality of life, or the truth, or even necessarily what actually happened. And I think it's just important to always keep that in mind as we explore these stories. Like, what truly, what's the meaning here? And then what do we choose? What meaning do we choose to take from it?
Yeah. One question that popped up a little bit ago that I think is really relevant to what you're saying now is, or that popped up for me, is why do you think that the narrative has continued in this way? Like, I think your point is so well taken that, uh, the Bible was written to communicate a message, right? Whether or not there are historical accuracies in it, like how many biopics have we seen, that are deeply that reflect real history but aren't about the history. It's about the magical nature of these figures and what comes out of that, the lessons that we can learn. So I totally agree. Like, remove any idea of history from it. Why was it even written? Why do you think it has evolved in such a way? Like, what was the inciting moment that it perhaps transitioned from being a cautionary tale about foreign influence, or um, a cautionary tale about Baal, into, or like idolatry of other gods, I suppose, influencing your tribe, into a cautionary tale about strong women? What is the tipping point there? And I think, of course, it's a spectrum. There's probably no one moment we can point to, but I'm curious your thoughts on that kind of inflection point.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so not all powerful women in the Bible were demonized. So that would be a starting point for me. So okay, like what are some examples? Well, Deborah, a judge and a prophetess, was celebrated for saving Israel. Esther was also generally considered although the name of God is never is not mentioned in Esther. It's, I think, the only book in the Old Testament that does not have God's name written in it. But nevertheless, I mean, Esther was celebrated um, as as a woman who worked was saved Israel. You have Purim and all of that. You have Purim. You have I mean, even we talked about it a few weeks ago with Mary, right, the mother of Jesus's mother. Why was she revered? Because she was she listened, she was obedient, she said yes, basically. So what do I see as the message is this idea of you know it's okay for women to have a voice as long as they do it the right way. So Jezebel demonized because she worked openly for her own gods and power and was destroyed. Esther worked within the system to save her people and was celebrated. So it's not to me, it's not what women do, but who they serve and how they fit into the order of the time, the male dominated order, I might add, of the time,
Right.
that's what determines whether they're hailed as a heroine, as a hero, or whether they're hated and vilified as a harpy. Which
Play the make
you know,
believe right.
yeah, they're basically saying this is the make believe. This is what the things we've made up actually say. This is and here's proof because this is what but what is it? What's it? Patriotic. All of these patriarchal, these man-centered narratives, they always rely. I mean, here's the common theme: they reward compliance and punish defiance. So Jezebel, her blood was licked up by the dogs, and it's a cautionary tale to me that shows exactly what will happen to a woman who refuses to play by the rules. Whether it's burning at the stake, drowning as a witch, whatever it is, it's whether it's vilified, whether it's the dogs licking your blood from the base of the tower that you fell from. Like, you step out of line, this is what happens to women who get go beyond their station. If it's okay if you're serving a purpose, but it better be within these rules, and you better know who's boss. Like, you can only go so far. So yeah, I don't know. That's how does that land with you? Does that resonate? I guess, Reese.
Yeah, I think so. And this idea of like the common thread being compliance versus defiance, it's like, yes, step into your femininity and the divine power that you have, as long as you understand that you are the moon and I am the sun, and that the sun is more powerful. Right? It's like, it's very that, in that, yeah, we could say the moon has power, but it's only reflecting the sun, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just, it's so, obviously the moon is so much more than that, and women are so much more than that, right? But I do think that that rings true. And I don't know, also thinking of this idea of like compliance versus defiance, I'm like, has anyone ever done anything worth doing that is compliance? One of my quotes that I have behind me is Henry David Thoreau. The glare is blocking it, but it says, disobedience is the foundation of liberty. And like, think of what it's called, the women's liberation movement, right? It is disobedience being allowed and being okay. I was watching a podcast the other day that is a podcast about one of my favorite D&D shows, and Dimension 20, shout out, love Dimension 20, and the podcast is
Nice.
called Adventuring Academy. And in it, they were talking about how characters within the show, because it's a comedy TTRPG show, and it's all comedians playing this game together. And when women tend to take really big swings in game, everyone gets in the comments and is like, "Oh my gosh, that was so crazy! That was such a chaotic move. This character is always so chaotic. I love how," and it's not villainized or vilified, because I think Dimension 20 and Dropout, the network that it's on, does a really great job of creating a supportive community. But you do still see that when the men that play characters take really big swings, it is, whoa, that was a big swing. Whoa, look at how that risk paid off. Ooh, interesting. I wonder what he was thinking there. Not, that's so chaotic.
Right, right, right.
Right? And even in a really supportive community, there is still this shift in tone that it's like, you have to disobey in the right way. Because there is something threatening about the disobedience of a woman, whereas Steve Jobs, he was a trailblazer. He shook up the status quo, right? Like, he changed the world. But women changing the world is scary. But men changing the world is brave.
And expected. That's what men
Yeah.
do, right? I mean, that's and I think that brings up a great question. What was Jezebel evil? Or was she simply a powerful, independent woman caught on the wrong side of history? That's what were truly her crimes is my question. Like, what
Yeah.
did she do wrong? So, I mean, here's some that I could come up with. She wasn't silent, so she refused to just she refused to not have her voice heard. She refused to let her voice be silent. She believed in what she believed in. She supported her own gods. She supported Baal, and that was the god of her childhood. And that's what she supported. What else did she do? She acted as a political equal to the king. So she dared to basically say, I'm powerful as well. And notice these traits that I just said were dangerous, or her crimes that were outspokenness, having agency, showing defiance. These are the ones that, again, the established order, the men in charge, couldn't control. And so I would offer that maybe that was her true crime. I mean, now again, it's not to suggest that every one of her actions was morally beautiful or lovely or what we would want somebody to do to us necessarily. But again, it's to examine. But what is she really being charged with here? And to me, I tend to fall on the side of I feel there's a lot of slander.
Yeah.
There's a lot of deliberate darkening and just really painting her in the worst possible light.
Right.
In my
No
mind.
one wielding power. It's not like every single person that wields power in a consuming way is charged with the Jezebel spirit, right? It's like we see lots of world leaders that are using power in dangerous ways, and I think we could see how some of the things that Jezebel does, like you said, aren't totally lovely, like wanting to take land from other people. It's like today if someone does that, it's like, well, that's not very nice now, is it? Like, no, it's not nice. But those aren't the types of people that get charged with being Jezebels. The people who get charged with being Jezebels are the ones who are outspoken. There would be plenty of people that you could call Jezebel if you really wanted to boil it down to the behaviors that she had that maybe we want to say aren't pro-social, aren't conducive to healthy relationships. But that doesn't mean that that her story hasn't been maligned. It's like, I also want to be clear that I don't think either of us have a problem with saying that women commit wrong action, right? That they do bad things sometimes because they are human beings. That does not make them a monolith for bad actions to be attributed to all women, or for a woman's bad actions to be reduced down to womanly inethicism. That's not a word, but you know what I'm saying, that it's like a woman does a bad thing and so it means she's a bad woman, not that the action that she did was bad, right? Like, sure, Jezebel had some behaviors and actions that were rude. We're not talking about those actions and behaviors. We're saying she wasn't a good woman, which actually has nothing to do about those other things. And I think that speaks exactly to what you're saying about what are actually the crimes that she's charged for. We could make a court case about some of the other stuff that she did and debate whether or not, anyone's justified in doing them. But no one actually even cares about those crimes. It's the crime of not being silent that is the one that people seem to care about. And I think within this, there's one thing that just sticks out to me so much about the Jezebel story, is that no one ever, ever has anything to say about Ahab. And in evangelical Christianity, there is no problem with telling men to take control of your woman, that you are her religious leader, that you are her spiritual master, that it is your job to teach and educate her how to be a good woman. That is a very common thread through evangelical Christianity. So we want to take that framework. Then whose fault is this to begin with anyways? If you want to use the framework of the people who are vilifying Jezebel, then it's Ahab's fault anyways. So get her name out of your mouth.
He didn't control his woman, right? Yeah.
Right.
Like,
he was a weak man.
Like, she
by of course, this definition, not my belief.
No. I mean, well, your wife came, she came to you and basically taunted him, right? Like, hey, aren't you the king, dude? Like, if you want it, take it. And so it shouldn't have been him. If it was so wrong, why didn't he say, oh, well, no, that's not a good thing to do.
Right.
Like, gosh, you're mean. I mean, there's so many ways you could, like, where's Ahab in all of this? Yeah, absolutely right. Like, he
was too beta.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I mean, another crime that she committed may well have been somehow daring to say that, she was equal in some ways to Elijah. And some traditions record she said something along the lines of, if you are Elijah, so I am Jezebel. So the true transgression was just asserting her authority as equal to the great male prophet. And that's something that, again, that's a hubris, a step too far for the male dominated religious order. And that made her a target for vilification, And so again, does her story serve as a warning what happens when a woman refuses to accept the subordinate role and instead tries to claim her own voice and power? Like, how often do we see, again, to bring it back to today, how often do we see, I mean, we talked about AOC, how many more examples are there in today's society of, a man behaves badly, says something, and it's just excused. But if a woman says something that is deemed wrong, she's slandered, she's vilified, she's called all these names. There is a double standard, and it's to my mind, it's not. I mean, it starts with noticing it, but it's also to challenge it and call it out when it occurs. And again, it goes back to what we talked about. I don't know, last week, a few weeks ago. Like, men need to point. It's great for women to see this because in some senses, it's preaching to the choir. But men need to see this too, and do the costly things to point out when this is happening, and not in a pound the table kind of way necessarily, but in a isn't it interesting? Like, it's amazing what you can diffuse when you come at it from a lens of curiosity. Wow, it's really
Yes.
interesting how you said that. I noticed, that that you mentioned this about, so and so in the office the other day. Like, what did I thought about that. Is that really a nice? Did you really mean? I mean, just to have those challenging conversations. Can we do that? How can we find? How can we make space in our world to I don't know, um, sort of reclaim Jezebel, I guess, is how I would put it.
Yeah.
Reclaim this, taking it from a slur to a symbol, in the same way you mentioned, like Lilith has become much more of has become, Lilith Fair. Lilith is mentioned in modern culture more. All of these different things. Maybe it's time for a movement for that as well, from a Jezebel perspective. Maybe her name needs to be reclaimed as a badge of honor. And what would a world look like? I don't even know the answer to this. I would love for our listeners. Like, what would your world look like that um, a woman who would not bow, who takes up space without permission or without apology, and who refuses to be erased or shamed, where that was actually embraced and celebrated versus vilified? What would it
Yeah.
be like to have my daughter grow up in a world where her voice, she could say the exact same thing as a man and be treated exactly the way a man would be treated for saying the same thing? Like, and furthermore, why the fuck is that a radical idea? Like, seriously. Like,
Yeah.
why is what I'm saying, why do I think internally, like, oh, well, we got, well, yeah, and rainbow, we're gonna have unicorns farting rainbows everywhere. Like, why is my notion, or this idea of we're equal, like, literally we need each other, and we cause each other to be better and grow, and there should be respect given? Why is that so crazy of a notion that it's like, oh, well, that'll never happen? Like, why? I don't know. Even just saying that kind of blows my mind, that idea
Yeah.
is just radical enough to get hate mail. Like, to merely say that, hey, Reese, you can take up space. I love the fact that you take up space. What else do you have? What you have to say matters and is important. Why,
Yeah.
why, why does that make me a superhuman being? Like, to me, that just makes me a human, like not a good or a bad person. It just makes me a what I should be. Like, it should be
It's
table
table stakes.
stakes.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm not some hero because I I think that what women have to say is important and should be listened to, and we should really look at their story and see where that what they have to say, what your story is. For
I
its
think, yeah,
crazy.
it just, I completely agree. And it so speaks to the, status quo of it all. I think in like using your voice to be the thing that challenges the status quo, that's why it's so scary, is that the people that the status quo benefits have a vested interest in the status quo. And I think part of the undoing of all of that is the reminder that the status quo, well, maybe that's not the right way to put it. The patriarchy hurts everyone. It does. And I think that it's scary to think about what it may ask of you, because tearing down of the patriarchy also asks a tearing down of a certain internal construct, right? Within men. And it's not asking you to not be masculine. It's not saying be effeminate, or which, even if you were, that's not a bad thing. But I think that that's the fear that a lot of men have when they hear this conversation. Well, men, don't let me project anything, so Dennis, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that that's a fear that we tend to see, is this like, oh, well, women say that they want all of these things, but you're never going to date an effeminate, emasculated man. And I'm like, why does everything that you just said emasculate anyone? If anything, it shows the strength of your masculinity to stand hand in hand with somebody. Power is not in everything that you can hold on to at once. It is in what you innately have when everything has been taken away. And it's really asking men to remove the fear of being powerless. Because power is smoke. There's nothing to grab onto there. And as long as you keep trying to create it, you are just hurting yourself by saying that this thing that you've invented is real. And again, it's not asking men to turn away from their strength, from their power. It is asking them to radically own their power. If Ahab had stepped into his strength, into his divine masculinity, into his nature of the sun, how could he and Jezebel have ruled side by side? How could he have perhaps aided in some of the ways that her temper did hurt some people, maybe, right? And how could she have helped him step up to the plate more, right? Like, it is this balance. We all have the masculine and feminine within us, and vilifying one or the other gets you nowhere. There was another thought that I had about this, but I just so, and it flew out of my brain, but I completely agree. And I think there's also this notion of like, well, wouldn't that be nice? It's never going to happen. And that is an intuition that we constantly have to fight against, exactly like you just did, right? That it's like, maybe not in this lifetime, right? But like you said, your daughter, like, is there a world where she is, in her 70s one day and it is better? Like, that makes it worth it.
And can we create, it's that quote of like be the change you want to see, right? Which is a nice coffee cup slogan. I agree. But how do can we create, I mean, and I'm just sort of spitballing here, how can we create communities like that? Can it be done society writ large? I mean, frankly, I think that's a tall order. That's a big, that's an Archimedes, give me a lever long enough and I'll move the world. But, we need a pretty big lever for that. But why? But does that mean there's nothing we can do? How can we create, which is what I think we're trying to do here, right? In with what we're doing here. But how do we truly create a community, a place, a space where we live out these ideals? Where women who do not bow, who will not bow, who refuse to relinquish the space that they take up, and who will not be shamed, and just literally do not possess the capability of being shamed because they know who they are. Because when you know who you are, you can't be ashamed, because who you are is perfect and beautiful. And so how do we create that? To me, that sounds like heaven, a place where people are free to be who they are without judgment, and with radical permission to be the beautiful, beautiful soul that you are in every way. How do we create that here in this world? Like, what's the call to action? How do we make this real for listeners and ourselves? I don't know.
The thing that I was going to say popped back into mind, and I think it is part of this, but there's also more here. So I'll say that, and then maybe we'll keep talking about this, because I think what you're saying is deeply important. But this idea that when you hear it in other people, meeting them with that gentle curiosity, like you were saying, of like, it's interesting that you said this thing. Like, what does that mean to you? And not having to be overly aggressive, doing that to ourselves as well. I think that there are two ends of the spectrum where those that are really trying to do this work will often beat themselves up at any moment where they realize that they have fallen short. Where it's like, oh, I totally slipped back into like gross misogyny when I said that thing and it just flew out of my mouth and I'm, oh, what's wrong with me? I'm the worst. I'm the worst. That's not helpful. You're aware of it and you're trying. Yeah, it flew out of your mouth. Okay, what now? Apologize to anyone that you may need to apologize to. Repair, make right, own it if it was to anybody. Even if no one had anything to say afterwards, you know, if you think about it after the fact and you're like, whoa, I said that thing and that really isn't the person that I'm trying to be, reach out to the people that you said it to. It's like, hey, don't know if anyone like had a reaction to this at all, but the more I think about it, the more I'm uncomfortable with the thing I said, and I just wanted to own that I'm working to not do those things, say those things, be that person anymore. And then forgive yourself and move forward, right?
I love that.
So hold gentleness in this work that you're doing. Don't just beat yourself up, because all that's going to do is make you want to cower in shame more every single time you do these things. And actually the act of repair and forgiveness is where the healing happens, is where the growth happens. On the other end of the spectrum, being tough on ourselves when we need to be tough on ourselves. One thing that I think is really revolutionary in my social justice work is just trying to be aware of my innate reactions to things. I saw a post the other day that was criticizing Trump's body because apparently he made some sort of comment about his height and his weight, and everyone's like, he must weigh so much more and he must be so much shorter, and a lot of the posts were very funny. And I think that this, for me, was a really great example of balance, of gentleness, and of aggression with myself, in that when I saw this post, I'm watching people make fun of him. And I'm like, that's really funny. And yeah, any man who has done as much damage to people writ large, but women who tend to be objectified in this way, I think has maybe opened the door to some criticism. You know, if you're in the public eye, you're going to get that criticism. And being able to laugh at that and, you know, be a little bit mean and objectify a man back, right? At the same time, holding this, okay, I don't think anyone should be objectified. Donald Trump is maybe the person that it is hardest in this world. Well, I don't even know if that's true, because there's a lot of really, really bad people that we could point to. But one of the people that it is hardest for me to remember their humanity. And so, yes, I want to create space for me being able to laugh at these jokes because they're funny and it's empowering a little bit. But then also meet that with, hey, as funny as it is, in this utopian society where we are all, you know, farting rainbows, that wouldn't happen. And that's not how I want to talk about anyone, you know? And being able to do and hold both of those things too, right? That I don't know if that's making sense, but having this gentleness for the self and like, yeah, the darker parts of me thought that that was funny and kind of wants Trump to get a taste of his own medicine, but also the person of me that's trying to be a really good person and see the humanity in everyone sees the flaws in that too.
Yeah, I love what you said. I mean, I love everything you said there. And it is an exercise that our listeners can absolutely try. And just, I mean, I know me personally, I will catch myself not even saying things, but like I'll see something and I'll make a snarky comment to myself internally. And I'll not even correct myself. I'll just notice that.
Just notice,
And
yeah.
there's nobody to apologize to in this case, but although I'm apologizing to myself, and here's why: because I'm only harming myself when I have these thoughts, because it's just me. I mean, I'm saying the same. It shows, it reveals how I really feel about myself. Like even to laugh at and I try not to pay much attention to anything Trump related, good, bad, or on either side of the spectrum, because frankly, I don't want to give the man any of my attention. Like
Yeah.
I want to give him as little attention in any way, shape. I don't want any part of his ick and shadow, what I consider to be the undesirable things to overcome my life. I don't want to be. And that goes true on both sides. Like I avoid people who are deliberately trying to hurt other, say negative things, whether it's MSNBC doing the talking or Fox News. Like to me, it's all, but it's because I want to be this person who is without blame in that regard. I want to live the way I'm talking here. I want my heart to be that way with everything I say. I want it to be. I want to be the person where literally, I don't think it's funny that you're making fun of Trump, though he deserves it, and his stuff is so crazy, and oh yeah, he's 6'7", and is a fantastic golfer, and all these other things, but you know, I don't want to be a person who gets amusement out of that, in a sense,
Right.
if that makes sense. Like I want to understand why people could do it, and maybe chuckle, but at the end of the day, I want to be bigger than that, because I feel I am more than that. We are more than that. And am I going to hit that mark all the time? No. And that's where the grace comes in, right? Because
Yeah.
but the more you notice those thoughts, then you can question, well, why did I just have that thought? You
Yeah.
see somebody on TV and you make fun of them. Like it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be a gender issue. It could be
Right.
any number of things. Just an accent, I mean, just something other. The person has 6 fingers. I don't know. I mean, we can find anything to make fun of somebody else for it, but that's not who I am, and really, it's hurting me. Is how I kind of look at it when I make these comments, internally about someone. Who am I really damaging? Well, I'm damaging myself.
Yeah.
And I do believe that. That doesn't always work. I mean, but I can honestly say I think less and less the way I used to.
Yeah.
Still, conditioning still comes in. You don't spend a lifetime
Right.
learning misogyny and living in a society that subtly and not so subtly, but in so many ways, you know, has this Jezebel spirit everywhere. And
Yeah.
this you don't have that not affect you. I don't care who you are, but I'm okay that it affected me, because I know I'm changing as well. I don't see things the way I used to. And that shows me the growth in my own person,
Yeah.
in my own journey.
Yeah.
The fact that
And
I can,
that's the thing to be celebrated, right? I think everything you're saying goes back to is trite and coffee cup and bumper stickery as it may sound, self-love, right? Like when you have that gut reaction to something, when I got some amusement out of poking fun at Trump, why did I get amusement in that? Because there are things that made me feel small. There are things that made me feel powerless and unimportant and small that he has said and done. And I gained some pleasure in the idea that this is making him feel small. And that's where that pleasure comes from the smallness in me. And when we want to step into wholeness, that has to come from love and seeing humanity across the board. It is about that wholeness. And that's, I think, exactly what you're saying is this, it's like fighting your singularity for your wholeness. And it is an internal battle in a lot of ways against all of the things that have been given to us for good or for bad. The programming that we were born with and that was installed along the way. It's now ours to do something with, though.
and it reveals things, right? You notice what you notice, when you ask yourself that question, gee, this was unlovely, yet I took comfort in it. It gave me some kind of joy or some kind of laugh, whatever it is. Why? Like, what is it? What am I? Because there's a belief you have, or there's a part of you that believes something, that this laughter is relieving somehow. There's a part of you that's uncomfortable with some, and maybe it wasn't even for you. It was for what how Trump's has denigrated other people you support, other classes you support, friends of yours, no matter what it is, whether it's trans rights, whether there's a whole host of people that are in danger, whether you're an immigrant, all of these things, right? But it really does show that there's a part of you that has there's a belief underlying all of this, that somehow there's a tension. And when you see this funny image, and it is funny. I mean, it's clever. People are clever. They say funny things. I mean, they're clever things, but it somehow makes you feel better about this discomfort you have, this fear you have,
Yes.
this underlying tension. And so that helps you resolve the tension. But the tension is only there in the first place because you created it to begin with. Like, the tension didn't come from Trump or anything else that's happening. The tension is coming from inside the house, and you're the house. The kingdom is within. The kingdom of heaven lives within you. And so anything that you're doing is coming from inside, and you have control over it.
Yeah.
Now, that's not to say you're always going to do the right thing. You're not, but the minute you step out of this idea of when you realize that you have control over all of this stuff, that literally you are the one creating it in your own mind, that's when you can start to change things, or that's when you can be who you choose to be, because so much of this we do on autopilot. How many years would I laugh at misogynistic jokes, or how many years would I talk with friends and the locker room talk or something? No, I never liked it. Like, it was never something I would engage in for myself, and would never. But I also wouldn't I wouldn't say, oh, I'm not comfortable with you talking that way. I wouldn't speak out about it. And that's okay. I don't judge myself for that, because I wasn't. Now, would I? Yeah, I think I would. No, would I sit there and bang the drum and no, but I would just point it out and say, I've been thinking about this, why, I have a daughter, and I shouldn't need to have to preface this with, I have a daughter, right? Like, it shouldn't matter that because I had a mother, I might have had sisters. I certainly had female relatives. I have, there's people I love who are women. I mean, all of these things should be good enough reason, right?
Yeah. But it does, I do think there is something to say for tactics and strategies, right? If it has given you a way in at some point, is that a way that it could give someone else a way in too? And I think that that's something we see a lot. Like, for example, in Christian evangelical traditions, an absolute vilification of the LGBTQIA plus community, until one of their kids ends up being queer of some kind. And then they're like, oh, I get it. This isn't wrong. I love my child. This is who they are. And then they become an ally, right? It's like this way that having a relationship to it does make it real for people. And I don't think that it shouldn't be necessary. Exactly like you said, right? Like, you shouldn't have to have a friend or a family member that is a woman or queer or a person of color or all of the above, right? Like, any oppressed or marginalized group, to find some compassion and empathy. However, if it is something that's moving the needle, using it to help move the needle for someone else, I don't think is wrong, because at least it moves the needle. And I think in terms of like creating the space to do this work, I think in a roundabout kind of answer to your question from a bit ago, I think doing what we're doing is a big part of it. I would like to think so. And being able to be open with people in your life and have the nuanced conversations like this that acknowledge that it's hard and that it's complex and that there's no perfect activist and there's no perfect victim. And that doesn't mean that you just give up. And it also means having grace for yourself. And even if you fall short, that doesn't mean it's time for you to throw in the towel, because you're not a perfect ally and you're not a perfect activist. There are so many things that I do and say that I realize, this is a great example. I recently learned that white sage and Palo Santo are actually part of closed practices of indigenous people in a lot of their spiritual ceremonies. And in our daily ritual, the daily podcast that I do at the Cohere Collective, I've been burning sage and Palo Santo in each and every one of those. Just not knowing, not thinking. Should I have researched and thought about it? Absolutely, and that's on me. Should I have thought a little bit deeply about it? 100%, but I didn't. And all I can do is move forward. Stop doing it. Acknowledge any harm that I caused, my ignorance caused, right? Like, being ignorant about it is part of the problem too, and move forward and do better. But also call attention to it and acknowledge, like, this is how I'm learning and growing, because I didn't realize I was causing harm. But when you know better, you do better. And not saying, oh my gosh, I'm the worst. I'm going to give you all of these emotions and feelings that now you have to deal with, that I feel so guilty and so bad, which I do feel bad, right? I do feel guilty. But that's a thing for me to work through. And not something to say, well, I'm a horrible ally to indigenous spiritual communities. No, a good ally acknowledges when they do something wrong and keeps going. Yeah.
Nice. I love it. No, it's a perfect example. And I think that's a great way for us to, I think it's a great ending point, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's this perfect ending.
Yeah.
For me, I guess the final thing I'll say, just on to close out Jezebel, and
Yeah.
I think we've definitely, I think there's so much more we could still talk about, but I also feel like we've definitely done justice to the topic, and that's really all we can do here. But to me, I think Jezebel remains a warning. But I think for us, maybe not the warning that was intended from the writers, in terms of, to me, it's, well, for me personally, and maybe others have the same thing, her story asks me to examine who gets to write history, and why, what their purpose is. It's a wake-up call for me to, when I read stories or when I hear things about people, to notice if are they being demonized because they wanted to lead, or because they wanted to speak their voice. And lastly, just it encourages me to look for a way to redeem, in a sense, or retake or reclaim these stories, and turn these tales of sort of vilification and shame into one of pride. And again, not suggesting that every action is perfect, but looking at the broader picture. So for me, that's where I land with this, that, seeing how this story was twisted is important. I think to recognize that how much else we've been taught or think is true has also, been twisted. And so, yeah.
Totally. I think that's brilliant. If history is written by the victors, it's time for you to pick up your pen. Because
love it.
You are the victor, right? You are. Write your own success. Thank you all for being here with us today. Thank you, Dennis, as always,
for your thoughts,
for holding this space with me, and always looking forward to next time. And listeners, we will catch you next time as well. Bow Down is a weekly podcast from the Cohere Collective that explores esoteric and empowered feminism.
Please subscribe to Bow Down wherever you may be listening. And if you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a like, a 5-star rating, and a review. And if there's anyone you think would enjoy this episode, or maybe just needs to hear it, please share it.
If you want to stay up to date on all things Bow Down, you can follow the Cohere Collective on any social media platform at the Cohere Collective, and check out other content and offerings at www.thecoherecollective.com.
If you're interested in working with Reese to find and pursue your purpose, I encourage you to head to www.reese.com www.thecoherecollective.com/life-coaching.
If you're interested in working with Dennis to shed your mask and embrace your desires, you can email Dennis at dennis@theheartstoybox.com.
Huge thank you to Jack Corbett for Bow Down's music. You can find him on Instagram at j.corbe. Thank you all for joining us today. We're so glad you're here.
And as always, we hope you feel like you are living more coherently. And until next time, love.